Daniel Harper was just an ordinary accountant, living alone on a quiet street in Brookhaven, until a single, calculated moment changed everything. Marcus Reed, a junior analyst at Daniel's workplace, seemed like a normal coworker, quiet, efficient, and unassuming. But behind the calm exterior, he harbored a dangerous secret. On a cool October night, the two lives collided in a way no one could have predicted. A security camera captured every second of the horror, recording a silent, cold-blooded murder that would shock an entire town and expose a meticulously planned crime hidden behind ordinary routines. Maplewood Lane was the kind of street where nothing ever seemed to go wrong. It sat in a quiet corner of Brookhaven, lined with identical two-story houses, trimmed hedges, and freshly painted fences. Porch lights glowed warmly at night, and neighbors often waved at each other during evening walks. There were no bars on the windows, no security patrol cars driving by every hour. People trusted the calm routine of their lives. Daniel Harper had lived there for 6 years. He chose the neighborhood because it felt safe and predictable. His house stood near the end of the lane, painted white with blue shutters and a single security camera mounted above the garage. The camera had been installed after a minor package theft the year before. It recorded everything that moved across the driveway and part of the sidewalk. On that October night, the air was cool and still. Fallen leaves gathered along the curb. Inside his house, lights turned off one by one as Daniel prepared for bed. At 11:42 p.m., the camera captured the empty driveway under the porch light's soft glow. Then, a shadow entered the frame. It moved slowly along the edge of the lawn, careful and controlled. The figure paused near the garage, almost blending into the darkness. Nothing seemed rushed. Nothing seemed random. At 11:47 p.m., Daniel stepped outside. He wore casual clothes, as if responding to a small noise or checking something briefly before sleep. He looked toward the driveway. Seconds later, the shadow shifted forward. At 11:50 p.m., Daniel collapsed onto the concrete. There was no visible struggle, no frantic movement, just one sudden motion and then stillness. The street remained silent. Porch lights stayed on. No doors opened. Maplewood Lane did not know that its quiet reputation had just been shattered forever. The morning after the shooting began like any other on Maplewood Lane. The sun rose slowly over the rooftops, casting pale light across trimmed lawns and quiet sidewalks. Sprinklers clicked on in neat patterns. A delivery truck rolled past without stopping. Nothing about the street suggested that a life had ended just hours earlier. Around 7:30 a.m., Daniel Harper's next-door neighbor noticed something unusual. His garage door was still closed, but his front door stood slightly open. Daniel was known for being careful. He never left doors unlocked. Newspapers lay untouched near the porch, and his car remained parked in the driveway. By 8:12 a.m., police cars lined the peaceful street. Officers moved quickly but calmly. Yellow tape stretched across the driveway, cutting through the morning calm. Curious neighbors gathered at a distance, whispering and watching. Daniel's body was found near the garage, positioned on the cold concrete exactly where the camera had recorded his fall. A single gunshot wound marked his chest. There was no weapon near him. His wallet was still in his pocket. His watch remained on his wrist. Nothing appeared stolen. Inside the house, everything looked normal. No broken windows. No forced entry. No signs of a fight. It was as if Daniel had stepped outside for a simple reason and never returned. When detectives reviewed the security footage, the case shifted from tragic to chilling. The masked figure approached with steady steps. An arm lifted briefly. Daniel collapsed almost instantly. The figure did not run. There was no panic, no hesitation. The killer simply turned and disappeared into the darkness. The silence of the footage disturbed investigators the most. No straged, no warning, just a calm execution captured on camera. By the afternoon, a short clip from the security footage was released to the public. Investigators hoped someone might recognize a detail that they had missed. Local news stations interrupted regular programming to show the grainy, black and white video. Within hours, it spread across social media, shared thousands of times. Residents of Brookhaven watched in disbelief as their peaceful neighborhood appeared on screens across the state. The footage was unsettling because of how ordinary it looked at first. The driveway sat under the soft glow of the porch light. Leaves moved slightly in the night breeze. Then the dark figure entered the frame. The person wore a hooded jacket, gloves, and dark pants. The face was hidden behind a mask. The body shape appeared average, neither clearly tall nor short, neither heavy nor thin. Detectives slowed the video down frame by frame. The killer stayed close to the edge of the yard, walking in areas where shadows were thickest. When passing near the camera's view, the figure slightly lowered their head, avoiding a clear angle of the face. It did not look like coincidence. It looked like knowledge. That detail changed the direction of the investigation. Whoever committed the murder likely knew about the camera beforehand. The position, the angle, even the blind spot seemed familiar to the attacker. Online, theories exploded. Some believed it was random violence. Others thought it was personal revenge. A few noticed how calm the figure appeared after the shooting. No running, no looking back. The most chilling part was the body language. The killer moved with purpose, not fear. It felt rehearsed. As detectives replayed the clip late into the night, one thing became clear. This crime had been carefully planned long before that silent moment on the driveway. Detectives began building a picture of Daniel Harper's life, hoping to find a motive hidden beneath his quiet routine. On paper, he appeared ordinary. He was 38 years old, unmarried, and had worked at the same financial firm in Brookhaven for nearly a decade. His neighbors described him as polite but reserved. He rarely attended social gatherings and kept his personal life private. There were no signs of gambling problems, unpaid debts, or personal disputes. His bank accounts were stable. His phone records showed no threatening messages. His email contained nothing alarming. To investigators, it seemed almost impossible that someone would plan such a calculated murder without a strong reason. At work, Daniel handled internal audits. His role required him to examine company finances carefully and report irregularities. Coworkers described him as detail-oriented and honest. He was not the type to ignore mistakes. 2 months before his death, Daniel had filed an internal report flagging suspicious transactions. Large amounts of money had been moving between accounts in patterns that did not make sense. The transfers were broken into smaller pieces, spread out over time to avoid attention. The report did not directly accuse anyone, but identified the department responsible for overseeing those accounts. After the complaint, Daniel's behavior shifted slightly. Security logs showed he had stayed late at the office several nights in a row. He had accessed archived financial data going back 3 years. It appeared he was digging deeper. Detectives learned that management had quietly opened an internal review after Daniel's findings. Only a small group of employees knew about it. Someone inside the company understood the risk Daniel posed, and someone may have decided that silence was the safest solution. Investigators widened their search beyond Maplewood Lane. If the killer had planned the crime carefully, there had to be traces left somewhere outside the quiet street. Traffic cameras at nearby intersections were reviewed hour by hour. For 2 days, officers studied headlights passing through the area on the night of the murder. At 11:30 p.m., just minutes before Daniel stepped outside, a dark gray sedan appeared on a camera 3 blocks away. The vehicle drove slowly past Maplewood Lane, continued to the end of the road, then circled back 10 minutes later. Its speed was cautious, almost deliberate. The car did not belong to anyone living nearby. The license plate was partially visible but blurred. Digital analysts enhanced the footage frame by frame. After several attempts, 3 clear characters were identified. That small detail narrowed the possibilities. The sedan was traced to a rental company located 2 towns away. Records showed the vehicle had been picked up earlier that afternoon and returned the next morning before business hours. The renter used a driver's license that later proved to be stolen. At first, it looked like a dead end. The name on the contract was fake. The address did not exist. But one mistake stood out. The online booking form required a contact number. The renter had entered a real phone number. Perhaps it was done out of habit, or perhaps it was overlooked in haste. That number belonged to an employee at Daniel's firm. The name connected to it was Marcus Reed, a junior financial analyst who worked in the same department Daniel had recently flagged in his complaint. For the first time, the investigation shifted from uncertainty to a clear direction. Marcus Reed did not fit the image of a violent criminal. He was 29 years old, neatly dressed, and known at the office for being quiet and efficient. His performance reviews were consistently strong. He handled financial projections and assisted with account management. To most coworkers, he appeared ambitious but disciplined. When investigators first looked into him, nothing immediately stood out. He had no prior arrests. His apartment was modest and organized. His neighbors described him as someone who kept to himself. There were no loud parties, no strange visitors, nothing that suggested instability. But financial records told a different story. Forensic accountants working with police began tracing the suspicious transfers Daniel had uncovered. The missing funds had been moved through a series of temporary holding accounts before being redirected into investment platforms under false names. Those platforms were eventually linked to a digital wallet connected to Marcus. The total amount exceeded $400,000. The transfers were small and carefully spaced out over 2 years. It was a slow siphoning of money designed to avoid attention. If Daniel had not noticed a minor reporting discrepancy, the scheme might have continued unnoticed. Further investigation into Marcus's online activity raised more concerns. Weeks before the murder, searches had been conducted from his home computer about unregistered firearms, ways to avoid surveillance detection, and common locations for residential security cameras. Still, there was no direct evidence placing him on Maplewood Lane that night. The rental car connection created suspicion, but suspicion was not proof. Investigators needed something stronger, something physical, something undeniable. Because if Marcus Reed had planned everything carefully, he would not have left obvious traces behind. Yet even the most calculated plan can unravel from a single overlooked detail. Forensic analysts returned to the security footage once again, determined to find something previously overlooked. The video had already been studied countless times, but this time specialists enhanced contrast, sharpened shadows, and isolated tiny movements. Every second was examined in extreme detail. At first, nothing new appeared. The masked figure moved as before, steady, controlled, and careful. Then, during a brief moment after the shot was fired, the figure adjusted a glove. It lasted less than 2 seconds, but in that motion, the sleeve of the jacket shifted slightly upward. A thin, curved scar was visible on the inside of the wrist. The image was faint, but clear enough for comparison. Investigators quietly requested medical documentation from Daniel's workplace, focusing on employees who had filed injury reports in previous years. Marcus Reed's file contained a record of a kitchen accident that required stitches on his right wrist. The scar location and shape matched the enhanced frame almost perfectly. With this discovery, detectives secured a search warrant for Marcus's apartment. Officers conducted a careful sweep of the residence, documenting every item. The living room appeared untouched. The bedroom was neatly arranged. Nothing obvious suggested violence. But inside an air vent in the hallway, officers found a concealed handgun wrapped in cloth. Laboratory tests later confirmed it matched the bullet recovered from Daniel's body. Gunshot residue was also detected on a dark jacket stored at the back of Marcus's closet. The evidence was no longer circumstantial. The careful planning, the rental car, the financial trail, and now the weapon itself formed a complete chain. The silent figure in the footage finally had a name, and the case was ready to move toward its final chapter. Marcus Reed's arrest sent shockwaves through Brookhaven. The quiet neighborhood, once thought immune to violence, suddenly felt fragile and unsafe. News crews arrived at the police station, flashing cameras and microphones capturing every moment. Behind closed doors, detectives reviewed the mounting evidence one final time before the case moved to court. In the courtroom, prosecutors methodically laid out the chain of events. They started with the CCTV footage, showing the masked figure moving deliberately across Daniel Harper's driveway. Every frame was analyzed, every pause and step noted. Then came the financial records, the trail of stolen funds, and the digital evidence linking Marcus to the rental car and planning searches for firearms and security blind spots. Finally, forensic experts confirmed the ballistic match between the handgun recovered from Marcus's apartment and the bullet that ended Daniel's life. The scar on Marcus's wrist, captured in the footage, became the silent but undeniable link between the suspect and the crime. Throughout the trial, the defense attempted to challenge each piece of evidence, but the pattern was overwhelming. Marcus's careful planning, the hidden trail of stolen money, and the physical evidence all pointed in one direction. The jury did not hesitate. After 6 hours of deliberation, they returned a unanimous verdict, guilty of first-degree murder. Outside the courthouse, neighbors whispered in disbelief. The man who worked beside them in spreadsheets and meetings had been capable of such cold-blooded violence. The orderly streets of Maplewood Lane suddenly seemed more fragile, their calm disrupted by the knowledge that a murderer had walked among them. Daniel Harper's life had been taken in silence, but the security camera had borne witness to every calculated motion. That same silence, once unsettling, had become a voice of truth. In the end, it ensured justice was served. The quiet witness, perched above the garage,